Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. It's the first one we've done in quite a few weeks, but with training camp on the horizon, we thought we'd get together and talk through some Seahawks topics, sort of get a feel for where the team is. And then when training camp comes along, we'll get into those terrible preseason games. And then finally, the real thing will start. And I'm very much looking forward to the football season being back again. So Robbie here, Adam and Robbie as well. If you have a super chat, bang it in the live chat and we will answer any questions that you have. So a pretty obvious place to start then, fellas. We're getting up towards training camp. It's been a very quiet period. There's not been a lot going on. There's not been any rumors or anything like that. You know, while the league is kind of a bit obsessed with where's Dalvin Cook going to go and all the stuff like that. For the first time in a while, there's not any talk about who the Seahawks might sign or a free agent who's still out there or someone that they might be able to trade for. Everything just seems to be going on and the Seahawks are not part of it. So as you look at this roster now, Robbie, what do you think? You know, where are the Seahawks at right now as they go into training camp? What do you see as the strengths, the weaknesses? And are you quite content with where the team is?
Well, I don't know if I can tell where the strengths are yet until training camp actually gets in, but I mean, I think we still need something for defensive tackle. I think we're still a little short there. I think they're going to be riding Cam Young a lot, and Brian Monet a little bit, depending on how he's going coming back. I think it's gonna be interesting to see kind of where they're going to play that position and what's going to happen there. I wouldn't mind seeing another linebacker as well. Was obviously super interested to see if anything happened with Jamal Adams. That didn't seem like anything's happening there. So I don't know. I'm interested to see this offense and see how they're going to click and how they're going to roll. But I think this is just a really quiet season. Like you said, like usually there's some talk about something going on. Right now there's not. I don't know if that's a bad place to be. I'd kind of like the quiet period, the calm before the storm happens. So get to training camp, kind of see what happens.
Well, the chat is already having its pound of flesh out of Adam. Billy, I suspect, is a Celtic fan, saying that you've got hell to pay, Adam, because you've stolen his coach.
Yeah, I mean, I wish. No, I was going to come in really hot and say I wish someone stole his NFL coach, but we're not on the anti-Pete Carroll train just yet. It hasn't started. But I have to be honest, this offseason has felt unbelievably long, to the point where I'm not sure I could name 7 Seahawks players at this stage, because the last time we saw these guys feels so long ago. I mean, Robbie's named Brian Monet, Cam Young, and Jamal Adams. Six words that I feel like I've never heard in my life before. It's felt like I've had a lobotomy with this roster. I mean, you cannot honestly tell me you can name more than 12 Seahawks players at this stage. It has been such a long time. I was dancing along to the 30-second countdown to get on the podcast. I was just looking forward to getting back with the boys and talking about it because, oh my goodness, it's been so long. And training camp's like 10 days away now? Is it the 25th? Of July they start? I think it's there or thereabouts, and I just need like a refresher course because I don't feel like I have a clue who anyone is.
I went on VSiN last week on the 4th of July, so it's about 10 days ago now, and it was to talk Seahawks. And as much as we all lived through it, and we do during the season, I must admit I did have to go and do a bit of homework and think about what the hell I was going to talk about, because it does feel like an awful long time. It's coincided with the busiest period I can remember in the terms of the day job. So I'm quite grateful that it's been as quiet as it has. But I think, Robbie, Adam's got a point there. It has dragged quite a lot. And I do just wonder if it's what I was talking about before. If you think about previous off seasons, it's felt like, and look, you're completely right. There's still a question mark at defensive tackle, but it always felt like there was something that needed to be addressed. A trade that needed to be made, a signing that needed to be made. There was somebody that the Seahawks Twitter would be going, right, now go and sign this guy. Or there'd be some good news for the Mariners and they'd go, right, all we need now is the Seahawks to sign him and we're cooking on gas. So there's none of that right now. It just feels like, I tend to think that the fan base is relatively content and just waiting to see what happens, Robbie. And maybe isn't even that sure about what's going to happen because it's still a young team. And we can talk about on paper, they've got a lot of names, they've got a lot of weapons. Those guys have to stay healthy. The younger players, especially the rookies, have to be able to have an impact. That's not guaranteed. I think that's one thing that people aren't really taking into consideration here. This is still a very young team with some experienced players. And I think there is going to be some growing pains. And the other thing that I think they perhaps lack, Robbie, the thing that elevated them from very intriguing, interesting team in 2012 to Super Bowl contender was just a big double whammy move of going and getting Bennett and Averill, and it just completed everything. And I just think that maybe the Seahawks are still to have that. There are other question marks, and I don't mean positionally either. I don't mean, they need 2 bookend pass rushers. They've invested a lot there. But whether it's a player or players coming in, I'm guessing that'd have to be next offseason now, that just finishes everything off. And that's bearing in mind, we also have to see Geno Smith play at a championship level consistently to feel that that position is addressed. We shouldn't just assume that it is. But I do think there is just something maybe that's required to finish things off, Robbie, to feel like, yeah, do you know what? You can feel really confident this team is a contender. But that said, I think the NFC is wide open. I want to talk a bit about that as well. But how would you react to what I've just said about the Seahawks?
So this is kind of funny you kind of mentioned that, because I've been watching this new show out on Netflix. It's called Quarterback. And I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. And it follows Patrick Mahomes, Marcus Mariota, and Kirk Cousins, and follows through their family and the training camps and all this stuff. And early in the season, the Marcus Mariota that he played, in Seattle, and he won. He beat the Seahawks, and I remember saying, God, I didn't remember that. Like, we were terrible. That sucked. And then like the next episode, it showed like, Kirk Cousins and like where the Vikings were at. And then the highlighted standings, it showed Seattle at number 3 as the 3rd best team in the NFC. And then I was like, wait a minute, what? And then I have to kind of remember like, oh yeah, like what a weird season last year was. Like, right. You went into last season and you thought, Geno Smith's our quarterback. We're banking on a bunch of rookies. We have no idea how it's going to go. We didn't have high expectations. We were thinking, okay, well, we're going to have 2 first-round picks. The Broncos are probably be really good, and we're not going to be very good. And the total opposite happened. We're fairly decent and won a lot of games, and we're hanging in there. And and the Broncos tank. So you got to remember some of these things, like last year, how different the narrative was compared to what this year is going to be. Last year, we were banking on a lot of rookies. I think this year we're still going to bank on a lot of rookies and their development into next year. But I think there's things that we're like already considering, like where's Tariq Woolen's injury at? Like what's the status of that? Why was that so, secretive and seemed like kind of just out of nowhere, and it was kind of a fluke thing. And, there's all these, how well is, Jackson Smith going to fit into the offense? Sounds like he's already like, people are hyping him up to be the next greatest thing. And, now we got, our running back room is just stacked, absolutely stacked. And how's that going to play out? I mean, there's a lot of things that you can look at and wonder, how's this going to affect the season? I mean, I feel like we've given Geno Smith every opportunity to succeed this year. And watching this quarterback show has reminded me just how weird last season was, and like the ebbs and flows of the games and everything. So if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend everyone watching to check out the Netflix show Quarterback. It's pretty damn good. So
is it worth seeing? Because I
really like it. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm so I have to really want to watch something. People recommend stuff all the time, and I go, oh yeah, I'll check it out. And I don't know, for some reason I just can't sit myself down and go,
as a football fan, I find it interesting. It's interesting just to see kind of like that, some of the back end stuff that you don't really get to see.
Someone I know who's not an NFL fan has watched this, and they sent me a message yesterday, and I'll read it out. And you confirm whether this is accurate, Robbie. He says, I'm watching the quarterbacks thing on Netflix. Kirk Cousins and his wife seem proper effing drips. Is that accurate or not? He doesn't know who Kirk Cousins is either. He'd never heard of the guy before he watched that.
Well, he fully admits he's fairly blah, and he doesn't have he's like, his wife dresses him.
Yes, does he mention that?
Yeah, he did. He's like, I got too much on my brain. I don't want to think about it. I just let her dress me. And so It's pretty entertaining. It's pretty good stuff. I thought it was well done, and he's just a dude. I mean, he's kind of a goober, but it's been really good. So I'd recommend it. But anyway, the whole point of me saying that was literally just the fact that like how weird last season was. It's so hard to have any sort of prediction for this year now after how weird last year was. I mean, I could see a scenario where, Geno absolutely tanks, and then I could see a scenario where he absolutely excels with everything that we got, and our running backs become the best. And there's so many, and I've seen people talk about like, oh, well, we're like a sleeper Super Bowl team. Like no one's really talking about it, so we have the opportunity to be that team. Maybe we could also be a team where we absolutely fail. So I don't know. Like at this point, I just can't wait to get actually into training camp, get into like playing some actual games and seeing how these guys actually play. Because you hear a lot of people. This is almost one of those worst time of the year where they talk about like, oh, this player's so good, and then it comes to like training camp and they just fall off, and don't hear anything about him. You have all these high expectations. So I'm trying really hard this year not to have like these major expectations on players.
Quickly on Kirk Cousins, he occasionally does some punditry in England. And so when you're watching the NFL on British TV, they will have Kirk Cousins on if he's not playing. So playoff time. And he would be sat there. And bear in mind, this is a guy who's on like $40 million. I think I mentioned this before. He's on like $40 million a year. And he always seems to be, he looks like he's being held captive. Like the room he's in is just like a bare white wall. Like you'd think he'd have a great office, wouldn't you? With the money that he's got. And it looks terrible. And he looks like he's on an iPhone 4 when he's doing the Zoom as well. You'd think the guy could afford a camera, a decent backdrop and everything like that. He's not like us. He should have got all the money in the world. He could pay someone $10,000 to do that for him. And he doesn't. And the other thing I was going to mention on Kirk Cousins is, and Adam, I'll ask you this. Do you think that, because obviously I've done a lot of the quarterback scouting for next year already, and this season is going to be another slog of watching quarterbacks constantly. I just wonder, should I be looking for who is, as Robbie said, the biggest goober out there? Because it's well known that Kirk Cousins expected the Seahawks to draft him in 2012. They took Russell Wilson instead, who some have suggested, is a bit of a goober himself. So I'm starting to wonder. And also when you listen to Geno Smith, he does like a catchphrase or two, and he keeps saying, he talks like a motivational speaker. And Pete is also a bit of a goober, isn't he? So should we be looking out there for that type of character in the next Seahawks quarterback? Is that really where, forget all the scouting, forget how they throw. Do they have to have the wife buy their clothes for them? Which clearly Sierra did with Russell Wilson as well.
Maybe this is a cultural thing, but Kirk Cousins strikes me as just one of the most abysmal people there's ever been. And I can't. I would rather.
Or there was Stalin, maybe.
With the possible exception of a couple of evil dictators, I suppose. But just every part of his mannerism is like Russell Wilson was annoying, obviously, to a real sort of level that got under people's skins tremendously. But could you even imagine having to watch 10 years of Kirk Cousins as your quarterback? Like the press conferences, the wincing after defeats, I just got to be a little bit better. And again, I feel like if he was his equivalent, I don't know how you transpose it, but if he was the equivalent sports star in Britain, in the Premier League or whatever, I just feel like he would be absolutely hammered by everyone on a daily basis. And I just can't. I can't with him at all. Him being on there is enough for me to not want to watch quarterback at all. Although I've heard that Mrs. Mahomes doesn't come across particularly well in the show either.
That's a shocker. That's an absolute shocker. His brother's not in it, is he? Is his brother in it? Is Mahomes' brother? If he is in it,
I haven't seen him in it yet. No.
Okay, fine. If he's not in it, maybe I'll get. The thing is I'm going to cut this, and I have a little folder on my laptop, and I'm going to save this. I might even give it its own folder, and it's like, return to this in March 2024. Because if Geno Smith has not terrible year, if he has a year which means that $31.2 million next year is too expensive for Geno Smith, we all know that Kirk Cousins is a free agent next year. He could join the Seahawks. And then we'll have to relive this conversation that Adam has had as he's preparing to watch Kirk Cousins quarterback, the Seahawks. Right, let's get it back on. Let's get it back on track here. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, Adam, is the NFC. And I was chatting to some friends, and they were sort of ranking the teams in the NFC. And this one person I know, he said, "Oh, well, there's like the Eagles, and there's the Niners, and then there's Dallas, and there's that." And I kind of like looked at that, and I thought, yeah, I don't know. I don't think you can have confidence in anybody in this NFC division. I don't even think the Eagles are as good as a lot of people think. I think the Eagles were the best of a bad bunch last year and had a lot going for them. Their defensive line was very good, but their secondary has lost players. They're old. They've got older cornerbacks. They've lost their linebackers. You know, people like Brandon Graham are a year older. Hassan Reddick's a year older. They have got some aging players. Darius Slay's obviously older. On offense, is Jalen Hurts has been paid now? Is Jalen Hurts? I mean, he'll prove over the next couple of years. Is he the real deal or not? I mean, he had a really good year last year, but is that it now? Is he an elite quarterback? They've got a couple of weapons. Their running game kind of relies on scheme rather than talent, I'd say. They've got some good offensive linemen. You've got to say that. And look, I'm not far from suggesting the Eagles are a bad team. I'm just not sure they're as good as everybody thinks they are. I think the same with the Niners. The Niners might have Sam Darnold at quarterback. And look, Kyle Shanahan's a genius, but it doesn't mean that every quarterback that he works with is going to be fantastic just because he's Kyle Shanahan. And the Niners have got a few, they've got quite lucky. Christian McCaffrey stayed healthy last year. George Kittle was around more than he has been in the past. Nick Bosa, the same. Are they an absolute surefire contender? Maybe. I don't think it's an absolute cast iron thing either. And then there's just like a whole bunch of teams. Like, I don't think there's that much difference between Dallas, Detroit, Seattle, maybe even Minnesota. I don't know. Like other teams like that. Is it beyond the realms of possibility that the Saints are not spectacular, but might not be any worse than Dallas, for example? I'm not sure. So would it be ridiculous if someone like Carolina was, with a rookie quarterback, just provided that bit of inspiration, and they've got some talent on defense and some weapons. So basically what I'm saying, Adam, is I just feel like the whole of the NFC is wide open. And if I had to predict anything, I think there's actually going to be a lot of unpredictable results, maybe taking wins off each other in the NFC. And it might actually be a really tight conference. It's either going to be a really tight conference or someone like the Eagles is going to run away with it and it's going to be everybody else. What do you think of the NFC?
It's interesting because I said on the podcast we did after the draft that the sand timer has been ticked over and the Seahawks should probably be looking at a 4-year window from now where, something needs to happen. Although I don't think this year is necessarily the one where they should be expecting anything big to happen because they've still got a lot of, first, second year players. We don't know about the quarterback situation. So in a weird way, I both think that the Seahawks could be excused for not getting something done this year. But also if they don't do it this year, there's probably 5 or 6 teams in the NFC that are looking at it thinking, tell you what, this could be our year. And if not this year, then next year. So it's one of those situations where expectations is probably unfair to make them too high, but sport has a way of presenting opportunities that sometimes have to be taken. And if you don't take them, you might live to regret them for a number of years. I mean, you only need to look at teams like the Rams a couple of years ago weren't necessarily a fantastic team, but it opened up for them and they were able to strike and do it. The Eagles, when Nick Foles was the quarterback, I don't think anyone could say that a team led by Nick Foles can be a superstar team, but the way in which the division fell and the league fell, they had to go to Minnesota and Kirk Cousins, my mate, or they had Kirk Cousins at home to get into the Super Bowl. And sometimes you get into a position whereby the chips fall to a point where you have to take advantage. And in a way, last year we went into the bye week 6-3 in a pretty bang average NFC. And I think we all thought when the season finished that we probably wasted a half decent opportunity there to win a playoff game, advance a little bit. And yeah, whilst I think the Seahawks are young, I don't know how long it can be excused to not start winning. And I really think they will need to win a couple of a or two playoff games this year, or I feel like they might have a couple of regrets going into the year after that. Oh man, everyone's got a little bit stronger now. And last year might have been a chance where it was wide open. And did we really take advantage?
I think it's quite hard, Robbie, to know how to view this team. And look, I don't blame any fans. There seems to be, and we're going to talk a bit about this, a bit of, I think, getting ahead of themselves. I don't want to, I'm not having a go at anybody. I think that some Seahawks fans maybe are just a few steps ahead of what is realistic this year. I still think it's, like I say, it's early. It's a very young team, and there's going to be some growing pains and some inconsistency there. And I think Geno Smith is a perfectly acceptable quarterback for this team. But I still think the second half of that season last year, Robbie, means there's a question mark there for me. I have to see him, and he doesn't have to play like the first half of the season for the whole year. I'm not expecting that because that's MVP level. But he just needs to avoid the peaks and troughs. He needs to be what Pete Carroll wants him to be, which is a fairly consistent performer over a number of weeks. He's going to have bad games. That comes with the territory of not being a top Patrick Mahomes type, and even Patrick Mahomes has the odd stinker. But he needs to sort of be somewhat consistent and be the kind of quarterback that Pete wants. I think he can be that. But whether or not he can take the team to where it intends to go over the long term is a question mark. The one thing I will say, though, Robbie, is I do think he's very capable of a season in him. Like Case Keenum got to the NFC Championship game, and Nick Foles won playoff games with the Eagles. So I do think that it's, yes, you do have a danger sometimes of picking out the exceptions to the rule and trying to use that to qualify or to give yourself hope. But I do think it's not beyond the realms of possibility of having success. But I think that he has to prove that. And the younger team have to prove that as well. I can't help but, and I'm sorry to go on about this so early into the season, even before training camp. But when you talk about defensive tackles, Robbie, I can't help but feel like if they'd have just had that bloody number 10 overall pick last year, which could have gone on Jordan Davis, so that you could have got your left tackle in Charles Cross at 9, and then taken Jordan Davis at number 10. And then get a big fat nose tackle with supreme athleticism. What we were calling him Thanos. If they'd had that, that makes this defense tick an awful lot. And I think that's where my biggest concern is, Robbie. I've kind of rambling a bit here, but I think that's where my biggest concern is that defensively there have just been so many question marks about the Seahawks for so long now. I think there's a big question mark about Clint Hurt as a defensive coordinator. I think this should be a prove-it year for him. I think if this defense continues to be crap this year, you've got to be ruthless about that and go, this ain't working. You can't just be old Powell's act and say, I'll give him another year. I think Adam's right. You have to eventually just be a bit more ruthless and go, come on, we're in a window here now where the conference is crap. I've got to go for this. So I think it's a lot to prove on him. And I also wonder, look, this scheme has just not worked for a lot of teams. And as far as I can see, the only teams it works for are Vic Fangio-led teams and teams that have Aaron Donald. And Vic Fangio's in Miami and Aaron Donald's in LA. And the Seahawks, if they're relying on a rookie, and I love Cam Young, but if the Seahawks are relying on a rookie to anchor this defensive line, we have seen what happens to this scheme when you have inadequate interior linemen to keep your linebackers clean and to let everybody else function. So that's where my concern is. And it's in many ways, Robbie, I kind of hope that Geno Smith earns every penny of that $31.2 million so we can focus on defensive tackles next year, because the Seahawks will quickly find themselves in a quandary next offseason if they are having to go hunting for quarterbacks, maybe even needing to trade up for quarterbacks whilst retaining a big hole at defensive tackle. That can become a big issue.
Yeah, I think you kind of spot it on right there. I mean, with the scheme being another major question mark. That's why it's so hard to predict what's actually going to happen. And when we heard early on in the offseason, changing scheme, and we what are they going back? Like, what's happening? And so then there's just been some rumors like, no, they're not. It's like some sort of hybrid or whatever. So like, who knows what's actually happening? I want to see what's happening when they actually get playing the games. It's too hard to guess at this point. Like, there's too many just like what ifs and you know, like I said, I could see it going either way with the season. You know, a team that we'd make a deep playoff run and things are great, or I can also see where we absolutely tank. But as far as like the actual NFC itself, I still think the Eagles and Niners are in a class of their own right now. I think they have, you know, they have the most talented defenses anyways. And I think that's, you know, how far can, you know, whoever's quarterbacking for the Niners take them. You know, I think that'll be a big question mark for that team. You know, and then the rest, we're just trying to play catch up to those two teams. I think that's kind of the way I see it. That's the way I saw it last year. And I feel like it's going to be fairly similar this year, with some surprises. I'm assuming there's going to be a few surprise teams and a few surprise moments, and hell, we could be one of those surprise teams. We were last year. Maybe we take a step forward, and there's just a lot of what ifs at this point. There's just a lot of guessing game without actually seeing them in pads and playing.
One other thing I have to say, and I think this is quite important as well, is I don't know if you guys have read any of this stuff. For some reason, this week became talk about the 2024 quarterbacks week. So you had Dane Brugler bringing out some article, and then you had the article that I think Albert Breer did, where he spoke to Trent Dilfer and people like that about the quarterbacks next year. And I found it really interesting because I watched the quarterbacks right at the end of the last draft and wrote down what I thought, and essentially said, for me, you know, everyone's been saying it's a better quarterback class next year, and I don't think it is. I thought there were 4 legit top first round quarterbacks. Obviously, 3 went in the top 5, and then Will Levis went at the top of round 2. This year, I think there's just 1. Now, other quarterbacks might push themselves up during the season, or others might get elevated. But I think you've got Caleb Williams at the very top, who's going to be the first overall pick next year. And then I don't think there's no CJ Stroud for the Bryce Young. There's no Anthony Richardson, as far as I can tell right now. Some of the quarterbacks who are being talked up as potential first round picks, I'm telling you now, they're going to end up in round 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because physically they're not good enough to go in the first round. That's the people. There are people getting touted in that first round now or talked up, and it's BS. And we have this every single year. You know, players who get elevated above their station. But what I do think there is, and this will probably help the Seahawks a little bit, is, and I think this is where they prefer to do their shopping because that's what history has shown. I think there are players in day 2 who you can take a shot on, and I think that's how they prefer to operate. And if Geno Smith doesn't prove to warrant $31.2 million next year, maybe he comes back on a cheaper contract, they rework that. Maybe they go with Drew Lock, maybe they go with somebody else and they draft somebody and then have a big all-out competition. That might be what they prefer to do, and then that still keeps your first-round pick open. But because, like I say, I don't think Drake May is as good as people say at North Carolina. There's definitely something there, but this idea that he's like surefire number 2 overall pick, or even a surefire top 10 pick, I'm not there with that. Trent Dilfer called him Joe Burrow, which for me is bollocks. I don't think that's a good comparison at all. And then look, I'm hopefully going to go to the Apple Cup this year. I will be in Seattle there. It's just depending on whether I can get into the game. And in one way or another, I'm confident I will do. But I want to see Michael Penix. I want to see that arm live. I want to have a good look in person at that throwing mechanics because it's funky, but he's definitely got the kind of arm the Seahawks like. Definitely got the kind of character that they like. So he will be an intriguing player, but he's not, for me, someone who I would necessarily expect to go in the first round. So anyway, a quick throat clear in there on the draft. I want to come on to this. Adam, we were kind of talking about it off air before we started. And you've got an opinion that I want to invite you to speak about. And I want to speak about something else. The first thing is, have you seen Quandre Diggs complaining on Twitter? I know Adam has, because he's been mentioning it. But I'm bringing this up to the chat, to whether you've seen it. He is determined, Adam, for the world to respect his authority and to give him the credit that he feels he deserves. Is this just the sign of someone who's pumped and jacked to get out there and have a bloody good 2023 season? Or is this annoying whinging?
Over a number of years, Rob, we've had a lot of fun on my show with a segment that's often repeated but never quite matched, where we put something in the bin, where something has annoyed us in the last week, and we have to put it in the trash can for our overseas listeners, or the rubbish bin for the UK posse. There is not a bin big enough for this player-led, I'm a top 10 player, I'm a top 10 player, I'm a top 10 player, particularly defensive backs who seem to get incredibly engrossed in the discussion and throwing shade at each other left, right, and center. I cannot think of anything less interesting than these guys prattling on at each other about who's a top 10 and why they're a top 10. And, there is always the veneer in the NFL that you're watching a group of players that, whilst they do wear your crest, and I'm sure they do care about the team, but sort of a lot of it does feel like, they're individual businesses within the team that you support. And it just comes across as sort of a narcissism whereby they're looking to get their next big contract off the back of these discussions. And maybe I am so wide of the mark here, and maybe this is a conversation that the group chat tomorrow on your site are going to be engrossed in and debating the stats. But I cannot believe that anyone gives a flyer who a top 10 safety is in their own mind. I can't believe it.
I'm looking down his Twitter timeline now, and it is just, it's almost like a campaign. I mean, have I missed something here? Is he running for office or something? Can you do that in the NFL? I don't know. He's complaining about. There's one tweet from yesterday that said, "All I will say about the list." I'm guessing that is this some kind of. I'm guessing someone's put a list out, and he's put, "What else do I have to do to prove I'm one of the best in the league?" Consistency, did that. Top 5 in ints since 2017, did that. Pro Bowl, did that 3 times straight. 6 years of 3+ picks, did that. First in said read, captain, did that. Big contract, did that. Play at a high level after a severe injury, did that. Everybody on that list deserves to be there, and I show it to everybody. I'm just speaking my piece. I just want my respect. I don't know who has written a list. Maybe someone can point out who has done a list here. I just don't know. There must be some kind of financial reason for it, Robbie. There must be a. I don't know if it helps with brand or anything like that, or contract negotiations. But Quandre Diggs has got no real reason to. I mean, as far as I can tell, he's well respected. He has received 3 contracts in his career, which is, not many players drafted in the range that he is drafted get that. And I think he's amongst the 2 highest paid players in the Seahawks roster are Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. So I'm kind of thinking
they're so disrespected, Rob. They're only the 2nd highest paid player in the roster. How dare they?
I know. I just the thing. Do you know what? I don't even actually. I'm going to change my opinion on this. I'm not actually that bothered about Quandre Diggs doing it, but it's the fact that the fans then feel like it just latches on to this mindset, Robbie, that the Seahawks are like hard done to or not respected, or their players don't get enough credit, which is what I'm going to go on to next. It just feels. I don't see it. I think a lot of people speak very highly of the Seahawks and of Quandre Diggs.
I think that's it right there. I think that's what it is. I think it's a game. I don't think it's real. He needs to know, like, he's gotten a huge payday from the Seahawks after he got injured. They showed him that respect. You were injured and we still gave you a huge payday. I think it's him. I think it's him trying to make that 2023 season narrative of we're the underdogs, we feel they're respected, and let's go out and prove something wrong. I think that's what it is. It's got to be. If not, it doesn't make any sense. I also think Twitter is a cesspool of crap, and I hate it. So I every time I get on Twitter, I just get pissed off. So I don't follow Quandre Diggs. I don't follow a lot of people that I probably should follow doing this, but because I had to scroll down while you guys were talking about it because I hadn't seen it. And I think it's whatever. It doesn't bother me. I just think it's dumb. I think it's probably some sort of narrative that he's trying to hype up the team for the next season or himself. It could be a contract thing. Who knows? I'm not really sure.
So it's funny because I've followed a fewer and fewer people in the Seahawks sphere because I just found myself getting into It's like red rag to a bull, or like dangling a sugar lump to a horse, or like a carrot. And whenever anybody gets into an argument on anything to do with the Silk Trophy, it kind of draws me in like a fly to light. And so I thought I've just got to stop debating with people and arguing with people I don't know on Twitter. So like that's why I've tried to distance myself, because I want to enjoy being a Seahawks fan. And yet it doesn't matter. Like, even if I follow like 4 people, including like the Seahawks and Pete Carroll, somehow these tweets keep emerging. Like I keep seeing them. Although to be fair, I don't want to move away fully from it, because I will miss out on things. Like he got a lot of grief this week. I thought Softy's tweets during the Mariners thing were absolutely fantastic, and I found that hilarious. And he got a load of shit for that, and I don't understand why, because I thought it was fun. I may well get grief myself for that opinion, but I thought it was great, and he may well have retweeted something about this. But basically what I saw was Emmanuel Ocho. So he works for, I think he's one of the few people left on the TV talking about the NFL after all of the people got cut. So a random Seahawks fan posted a tweet a week ago, and he quote tweeted this. It's just a random fan who was complaining about the Seahawks not getting enough respect. And he says, like, Seahawks fans, it's not that the media isn't giving you all enough credit, it's that you're watching the wrong media. And he CC'd Quandre Diggs into this. And I thought, here's the thing. Like, so I'm going to read what this person was complaining about, this fan. But I thought, hang on a minute. So you've got Emmanuel Acho going on whatever TV station. I think it looks like is it Fox or is it ESPN?
I think he's on Fox with Shady McCoy, Joy Taylor. I think he's on that show.
Okay. So he's on there. So it's a national TV show saying the Seahawks are a pretty good team. And then you had Rich Eisen last week. Who's the my memory is so terrible. I'm 39 now, so my memory just goes. Lewis Riddick was on Rich Eisen, basically saying, I love the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks are primed to be one of the contenders in the NFC. And there's quite a few people, in fairness, who are saying stuff like that. There's been people like Chris Sims were extremely complimentary of Seahawks draft. A lot of people loved what they've done in back-to-back drafts. There's a lot of respect, and a lot of people like Geno Smith in the media. I think that I've just seen this message. My Big Mike has distracted me. Appreciate that, Big Mike. And so I my take was that I thought basically it was quite positive. The world of national media on the NFL has been quite positive. But then the tweet that I'm talking to, so it's just a random Seahawks fan. I'm not going to name him because I don't want people to go and seek this guy out or anything, because I'm not criticizing him. So he posted this. He started his tweet with, I gotta speak on this. Which, I'm sorry. It's time that somebody said this, because this has gone on for too long. I gotta speak on this. I'm quoting word for word here. Being a Seahawks fan is tough. Not because of the team itself, but through the media. This team and its players constantly get lowballed by the media, consistently at every corner. We aren't a perfect team, but this needs to be said. This is a Twitter thread, by the way. That's the start. That's the opening gambit. And thank goodness somebody's finally talking about how hard done to the Seahawks are. So his first tweet includes a quote that the Seahawks had a lack of primetime games or something, and Quandre Diggs, Kel Surprise, and Tariq Woolen were complaining about that. He took a picture of that. He then goes to say, oh, God, there's so many tweets. I think even some of them have been missed out. He says, let DK go to another team with his production and he'll be respected. I mean, is DK Metcalf not respected? Let Tyler have the resume he has elsewhere and he'll be properly ranked. Everybody loves Tyler. Let the best cornerback in the draft go elsewhere and he'll be worshipped. Everybody loves the Devin Witherspoon pick. Let Woolen's productivity go elsewhere and he'll be ranked better, etc. Tariq Woolen got constant praise last year. Player bias insanity. Like it or not, Seattle has a lot of talent, but in the end, we will still be put out of the top 15 in primetime games, even with the top 5, arguably top 3 skill group. A great put-together secondary, 2 rising tackles, a great backfield, and good QB play. Ranking insanity. It doesn't matter how good of an offseason or season Seattle could have, it won't matter. If you think Seattle is the number 16 team, you need to put down the pipe. Teams could have a mediocre offseason or have an overrated signing, and they'll be higher in the rankings. Seattle are one of the most consistent teams in the NFL. No matter how the roster looks, people never lay down and die. Something a lot of these coaches can't do. We've shown consistency, yet these overhyped teams could come out of nowhere and get multiple national televised games. And finally, I would like to say some teams in the NFL get overhyped, whether it be overrated offseason moves or general media hype. Seattle can make all the right offseason moves and we will still have a 7-win team and a bunch of doubts. Laugh out loud. I genuinely think I've missed some tweets. I think that's a bigger thread, and I've just it's just showing me what it shows on Twitter these days. You know, it's harder to follow a thread, isn't it, on Twitter? But you get the point there, Adam. For me, it's all nonsense. The Seahawks have got a lot of praise. I'd say more praise than most. They're being talked about as a contender. I don't really know what fans expect. And I don't think it's just the Seahawks thing. I think a lot of fans are pretty delicate. If their team are not being called the champion-elect next year, they complain about it. But none of this is true, is it really?
No, the stuff that really sort of grinds my gears is that if the Seahawks go out in the first round of the playoffs in a fairly meek fashion, you'll have that same person, whoever he or she was, saying, hey, look, it's a great season. It's a young team. You can't expect too much of these guys. And it sort of is like at the same time as people wanting to demand that this team gets the respect of the big guns, they don't put the same level of expectation on the team when they don't get over the line. And it strikes me as really wanting to have your cake and eat it too. Like, I am totally fine if we want to go into this season saying that we are a top 5, top 6 team. I could certainly close one eye, squint with the other, and say in the NFC that's fine. But if that's what the target's going to be, then can we all be really pissed off if we don't make the NFC Championship game? Because it seems at times we get the, talking at both sides of our mouth here, where some fans are some fans, it's a really generic thing, but you know what I'm trying to say. You get the same sort of people that demand that the team get more respect, but then when they sputter and falter towards the finish line, well, it is what it is. You couldn't expect too much of this team. So if there's consistency across the message, I'm completely fine with it. But that's what really has rankled with me with probably the last 5 years of the team, that we go into every season where they're demanding that they are held up as, the big franchise, but they don't act like it. It's kind of all talk, no trousers.
We also have to remember, Robbie, that what was the Seahawks like 9-8 last year? That's to rank a team that finished 9-8. They've had a great draft, and I like the Draymond Jones sign out, the Jaron Reed signing, but they were, that 9-8 it's 16th overall range, isn't it? Really, they are a team that I would say, could finish between 12 and 20 quite easily. Personally, I'd probably have them ranked. I think some teams are being overrated, but I don't necessarily think the Seahawks are being underrated, if that makes any sense. I think, because I do think that for all the people who might go, I'm not sold on the Seahawks, which is a fair opinion to have, there are plenty of people like Louis Riddick and Emmanuel Acho who are going, wow, watch out for Seattle. They're coming. I just think a team that played as badly as it did on defense last year, it needs to sort of push on. And I don't get this idea, Robbie, that there's kind of some like national bias against Seattle, or that there's a reason why other teams get promoted higher. The Seahawks were, oh my word, were the most trendy team in the NFL 10 years ago by an absolute mile. You can just see you only have to walk around England to see how many Seahawks jerseys and hats and hoodies you see these days versus how many you saw when I moved back to the UK, when I lived in the West Coast. It's astronomical how many more Seahawks fans are over in this country because they adopted teams when the Seahawks were on the rise. So they were a very trendy team, and they will be again. But I think that there's probably a lot of people in the media, not unfairly, who need to see this defense play better. And the other thing is, look, the top quarterbacks are always going to get a little push up, aren't they? Like the Chargers are not necessarily a better team than Seattle. The Chargers got their asses kicked by Seattle last year, but they've got Justin Herbert. They've got Joey Bosa. They've got a star power, haven't they? You know, teams like that will always get ranked a little bit higher than a team like the Seahawks that doesn't really have that big name, because they don't, do they? Like the Seahawks don't have big name pass rusher, top 5, top 10. People accumulate. They don't have a great young quarterback like Justin Herbert. They have Geno Smith. So people are going to second guess that a little bit, but that's fine, isn't it, Robbie? We don't need to complain about that. I'm perfectly content with how people view the Seahawks and don't really care. Like it's the proof's going to be in the pudding when the games start.
Yeah, I mean that right there. That's it. I literally don't care about rankings at all until games start. Like I'll start looking at it. You can rank us 31st or first. That means absolutely nothing. And I find it weird, like if this is really actually bothering Quandre Diggs' ranking, that some random dude off the internet who just happens to be a sports writer at some, place, that he's going to be that upset about that. Yeah, this guy has his opinion. Like, and then there might be a little bit like, oh, what are we in? Seattle's in Alaska, right? There's a lot of that commentary, and we have to fly the furthest every year to play our games. There's some of those things, but like I really don't care about rankings. It's just they're fun to look at sometimes, and I'll admit I think I saw the cornerback one, and I was like, oh, interesting that Woolen wasn't listed there, and Sauce Gardner was listed at number 2, and I was like, then weren't they just like head-to-head battle? So I mean, I did find it interesting, but again, it's like whatever. That's like one person's opinion. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, I just wish to stop complaining about it. We don't need all this. Like even the sort of just the way that tweet series opened. Like we've got to talk about. I've got to say something here. Like, oh come on, man. The Seahawks are not hard done to. We've got a couple of super chats. Blitzy says, speaking of whinging safeties, anyone else seriously ready for the resolution of the Jamal Adams issue? His 2023 $18 million salary isn't justifiable. Cheers to the SDB live stream crew. I am intrigued to know what the plan is here, because he is, as Blitzy mentions there, and thank you for the super chat, Blitzy, really appreciate that, due an $18 million salary. They've obviously not cut him. They've not restructured it at this point. I think that the horse has bolted really in terms of, I really wish that they'd done something with that contract and applied a bit of pressure to Jamal Adams earlier in the year so that they could save some money there and actually go on bring in the kind of defensive tackle that they're talking about they're missing, because I just think that would be better. And if Jamal Adams was prepared to work on his salary a little bit there, there's no justifiable reason for him to be earning either $18 million. The safety market's collapsed. You could apply that pressure to him. He is not worthy of being the highest paid player on the team. It's unclear when he's even going to be healthy at this point. Is he even going to be ready for when the season begins? Nobody knows. This idea that he's still due $18 million just seems like a waste of money, frankly, that they should have gone to him and said, we need to do something about this. If he was cut in with the post-June 1st designation, and you take the dead cap hit moving forward, which, look, the chances are they're going to have to take that anyway. We're just kicking the can down the road, because unless he comes back and has a fantastic year, he's probably going to be gone in 12 months anyway. If you're not going to do that, then, or if you did do that, rather, he wouldn't earn anywhere close to $18 million this year. No one else is paying him that. So you say that to him and you say, look, I'm not being funny. You ain't getting $18 million with your situation. We need money. You were the highest paid player on the team. You didn't play for us last year and you've had loads of injury issues. Can we work on something here to save maybe $10 million and rework this contract? And if he says no, then you bite the bullet. Instead of going into this with $18 million, Curtis, who's Char on the blog, mentioned this. He wrote some very interesting notes ahead of training camp. And one of his points, I've got it written down here, was to address Jamal Adams. Last year, Chris Carson was cut with a failed physical designation, July the 26th. Not exactly apples to apples, but we should be hearing more on his rehab from a torn quad tendon. About half the NFL players who've had the injury have never played another snap. If he's staying, a contract reworking is essential. $18 million at full health is too much. $18 million for probably 8 to 10 games is insane. No excuses. He then goes, apparently they're in a holding pattern on the DT position with no new additions coming until camp. Mono status, can they really count on Cam Young? And he mentions Miles Adams as well. And this is the thing. Look, on the one hand, I completely agree with Curtis that this in terms of purely the salary, it's not justifiable. What I would say is that, because I think there isn't a defensive tackle out there, guys, who I think is worth having. And who you're trading for at this point. All of the big names, if you wanted to make a big splash, have signed new contracts. Simmons in Tennessee, Quinn Williams today with the Jets has signed a big contract. So what exactly is you're going to do there? There's nobody to trade for to make saving money on Jamal Adams really worth it, Robbie. So what is the plan? What do you think? Are they just going to roll with Jamal Adams and hope that he is healthy at some point, that he can contribute to some extent? Because the Seahawks have been very good at just drawing a line on the bad moves and moving on. This is the first time where I feel like they've really, really stuck by this stubbornly, desperately trying to hope that this works out for them.
Yeah, the idea of like approaching him and doing something with his contract is all well and fine. But what I don't want to do is push money into the future. I would rather eat it this year and then just call it good. If that's what they're going to do, see if he can play at all. I just don't want to eat money later in the future for this deal any longer. I want to get his money off the books as quickly as possible. So, yeah, I think what we're probably likely going to see is they're going to stick around, see what he can bring to the defense this year, if anything, and if not, then I think he won't be back next year. That's my personal opinion and my guess, but I don't know.
I'm having a look at what the situation is here with Jamal Adams. So if he was if they were to cut him tomorrow, let's say, he would cost $9.6 million this year. He would cost $14.2 million next year, and they would save $8.4 million. I still think that if that meant you kept Al Woods and Ryan Neal, I still think that would have been that's better than having Jamal Adams with a major question mark about whether he's healthy or not. But that's if they cut him now and those players aren't available anymore. So that's the situation. In a year's time, so we're talking next offseason, if they were to cut him before June the 1st, there's not a post June 1st cut, that would cost them $14.2 million next year, and they would save $9.3 million. So they would be eating $14 million dead hit. They might be willing to do that. The trade's the same situation. The finances, whether they trade him or cut him, the money situation is the same. And if they were going to do a post June 1st cut next year, it would be they'd take on $7 million next year, $7 million in 2025, and they'd save $16.5 million. So I think the most likely scenario, unless he is gangbusters this year, Adam, is that he will be a post June 1st cut in a year's time, and that they will spread the money out, and it's a little bit easier to swallow than it would have been this year. But what is the future, really? It feels like some fans, I see it on Facebook every now and again, someone will post, can't wait to see this guy ball out for 16 games. And I'm thinking the chances are he's not even going to be available for week one. So what eventually, when is the Band-Aid going to come off? How much rope do you give him? And if he's back in, is 10 games of him enough for $18 million?
I mean, Pete loves a bit of a word salad when he's answering certain questions, but there's been a couple of times on the radio over the offseason that he's talked about, we really want to be able to, have Jamal play football again, and live out his dream of playing football. Like the way in which he's answered the question is almost like it's not an absolute guarantee that this guy's ever going to play again, as I think Curtis alluded to with his notes. And that, for me, I don't know how that works from a contractual standpoint, but I don't think we need, when they come back to training camp, if he's on the PUP list, which I think is not beyond the realms of possibility, that's 6 games nixed straight away, isn't it? And I have a weird feeling there could be a bit of a tricky sting in the tail to come with this Jamal stuff, because the way that Pete has spoken, given that he is the most positive of people when it comes to stuff, and whilst he is quite airy-fairy with his language, I do think he's quite careful with the way he talks about everything and is very measured and is the ultimate protect the team in how he answers questions. the fact that he's even alluded at times to the idea that Jamal might not be sort of, back on the field, let's go. I think that's something that is for the watching. Because look, it's been a disaster. Let's be honest, the Jamal thing, and we've said it 1,000,001 times. There's no point, raking over old ground on that. It has been what it has been. It will be what it will be. But I think the final sort of problematic part of this could be that he may never play again. And it's one of those things that training camp needs to come around so we can, not for us, we're just fans, but some clarity on that, I think, is coming. And I don't know if we're going to get, hear what we want to hear on that.
There's a couple of other things that Curtis touched on that I think is worth raising here in the final 5 minutes we've got. He mentioned, do the centre and right guard battles need to be settled sooner rather than later for O-line continuity? I think they do. I know that they like to have a competition, but I do think there has to be because they are changing the centre, definitely, because the old centre retired. I think there needs to be some consistency there and some work. And I'm sure they will probably do that, but I think it's an interesting point to raise. He also wonders how long until they bring Godwin Igwebuike, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not, back, which I think is an interesting one because he was such a really good kick returner. I understand because they've got good depth at running back now. They might not feel like they want to carry him just as a return man, but he was such an explosive return man last year. I think it's a vital weapon. He flipped field position a number of times, and I'd love to see him back. I don't know why he isn't back, frankly. There must be a reason for that, financial reason or something, or a numbers game, because he was an impact player in terms of going back with those kick returns. And then the other thing was, are the prize rookies' hamstring challenges behind them enough to be full go at camp? I'm going to be really interested about that because Jackson Smith and Jigba missed all of last season, apart from he was struggling through it at the start of the season. Then he basically sat out. And Devin Witherspoon wasn't at full go in training camp and didn't do a lot of the stuff pre-draft. So I'm intrigued to see if that, because you want them ready to go. You just want that question mark. You want them out there competing. So you don't want them getting behind the 8 ball. So I am interested to see that when camp begins, and I'm sure when training camps begin, we'll get together and have a conversation about some of those topics. Chris, thanks for the super chat. Chris, he says Derek Hall, my new favourite player. I think he steals reps from defensive tackle. Is it? Oh, Derek, that's not defensive tackle. He means Darrell Taylor, doesn't he? Especially on first and second down. What say you? Robbie, do you think he'll steal some? I think there's a decent chance he will. He's a very mature player, very physical. I think he may steal some early down reps.
Originally, I would say yes, but the fact that we had Boye Mafe sitting on the bench in place of Bruce Irvin tells me that maybe not. So I don't know. I would hope so. I'd like to see some of these guys get an opportunity to play, but it's hard for me to predict that right now with what kind of happened last year.
It's a good point. It's a good point, there, Robbie. Well made. That Pete doesn't like to trust these rookies, and it's not just that. I mean, he didn't really trust Michael Bennett year one. He didn't trust when he came back. He was more like a rotational player. He didn't start Frank Clark very often early in his career. It took a bit of time there. Boye Mafe last year, so maybe he'll do the same with Derek Hall. And Big Mike says, support the site, folks. Big Mike, big supporter of the channel and the website, the blog. So big thank you for that $5. And I really appreciate everybody who's been tuning in live, because this is we didn't know how many people were going to be watching live to a July Seahawks conversation, middle of July, still some way away from camp. And I appreciate everybody. Chat's been nice and lively. A few super chats, a few people watching. So really appreciate it. So yeah. How are you going to kill the last few weeks before the football season begins then, guys? Have you how do you get your sporting fix? Is there anything that you're looking forward to? Are you watching the golf or anything like that, or the Ashes? You watching the Ashes, Adam?
You know full well I'm watching the Ashes. I think we've had a few social media conversations, and honestly, the Ashes is just consuming my mind at the moment. The fact they've given us a week between Test matches, it feels like a human rights violation, to be honest. I need it to come around. Robbie, do you have any idea what the Ashes is? If I gave you 27
no
guesses.
Idea. No, I have no idea. But I liked your comment about what you just said about so I thought it was pretty good. But no, I have no idea what you're saying.
Someone has just said in the chat, what the heck are the Ashes?
Yeah.
All right, Robbie, let's play 20 questions. You can ask us and we'll see if we can establish what the Ashes are.
I mean, my first guess was it was a TV show, but then you started. I don't think it is.
In a way,
is it some sort of like reality sport TV show?
No. Well,
we're living through it in a reality.
Yeah, and it's very dramatic.
Okay, I don't know.
The Ashes is a cricket series between England and Australia. It's 5 matches. Each match lasts 5 days. And it is the most engrossing. It's everything that you could wish for from sport.
It is 5 days. Like imagine a baseball game that starts at 11 o'clock in the morning and goes on till 6, 7 o'clock at night for 5 days, and that's what it is. And the draw, like the ebbs in this particular series, is ebbing and flowing. Like 1 minute England will be on top, then Australia will be on top. It's 2-1 to Australia after 3, and the other thing is because this is the kind of thing I feel a bit sorry for Americans, because I don't think you have any rivalries like England and Australia at cricket. Like there's pure, like it's a great rivalry because it's absolute hatred while the game is going on, and the fans don't even get on that well. But as soon as it's finished, there is sort of an inkling just to have a beer with each other and just sort of have a good crack. And like I can remember that we won a very legendary, if you can have a very legendary Ashes series in 2005. And that's when I went to live in Vancouver, and it was flooded with Australians in Vancouver. And they would often joke that every third word that I mentioned was cricket, because we'd recently won the Ashes. But you could have there's a real sort of great sport hatred between England and Australia when it comes to the cricket. There's been a really controversial thing in this series, hasn't there, Adam? And it just makes the drama all the more interesting. It is a very special thing, and it only happens every 2 years. So we play Australia every 4 years in England, and every 4 years in Australia. So there's like a 2-year gap between series. So it doesn't come around that often. So you have to wait a while for it. Are you intrigued?
I might have to check it out. I might have to Google it and see if I can get into it. Is there like a documentary I can watch on this? Then maybe it help me.
Do you know what? They should do something. If they'd done like a Netflix documentary on this series, I think it would have got a new audience. It'd be like, when the F1 had theirs, Formula One a few years ago with the drive to whatever it was called. I can't remember what it's called. I didn't see it, but it was Lewis Hamilton against Max Verstappen, and that was very dramatic. If they'd done it on this series, Adam, I think it would have brought a whole new audience to cricket.
It'd be great, and it is worth saying that it's called the Ashes because the trophy that they're competing for are the bales, which is kind of the wooden outpost, for the sake of argument, that were burnt to the ground in the late 1800s when Australia won the first ever game against England. And those actual Ashes are being competed for right now, hence the name. So this older than your country, Robbie, give or take, plus or minus 100 years. Like this is serious stuff now.
Yeah, he's right. It's like, imagine a baseball game between two teams that only play each other every 2 years, and they burnt the mound and put it in this tiny little urn. It's like a little brown urn with like some writing on it, like here is the ashes of the England cricket team or something. And it's on this little, and it's just the wooden bales in this little thing. And whoever wins the Ashes, they get to, like, when you like lifting a big trophy, like you get the Super Bowl trophy, it's like, yeah, you lift it up and all that. It's like the European Cup in the football. It's an enormous jug-eared cup. And then when you get the Ashes, it is literally just a little tiny thing that someone holds up and lifts this little urn with the ashes in it.
I literally just Googled it and I spot the first Google image that came up was some dude in a green hat holding a little like shot glass looking thing going,
yes, that's it. That's the Ashes. That's what they play for. But it's amazing. And do you know what? If you haven't lived until you have been, so there's several of the cricket grounds in England, and some of the stadiums, like the main one at Lord's, it's quite a historic place, very polite, very measured. But if you go to some of the other grounds, it's quite rowdy and fun, and you just the banter and the humour and the culture around cricket is just fantastic. A day at the cricket is something. I wish more Americans
We've lost
knew
about
about
60 viewers right now, just FYI.
I know. Oh, actually, it's gone up. It's gone up by 3. It's gone up by 3. So we're leaning on the Ashes for this. But honestly, if you are an American and you are in England, you're not going to get a ticket for the Ashes. But if you're ever in England and there is a Test series going on, go and check it out. Just for the hell of it, because I've watched the baseball games and I'm not a big baseball fan. So you go and watch the Ashes, and Adam will buy you a beer, won't you, Adam?
Always, absolutely. That's the least I could do. But in about 3 weeks' time, Robbie, Rob and I will be hugging in the fountains in Trafalgar Square as England have won the Ashes and reclaim them for the first time in a few too many years. I can promise you that.
It's just sorry, and we're going to wrap this up, and I'm really apologize to all the Americans who don't care about any of this. But they're just the when you play something for 5 days and it comes down to like the finest margin, which tends to happen in the Ashes. It's just so incredible, isn't it? There was this one game where this one guy, the England captain now, Ben Stokes, there was that 1 wicket left, which means it was the last out. They had 1 out left in a baseball terminology, Robbie, and he had to basically overturn it'd be like being 20-0 down, 20-0 down in a baseball game in the 9th inning with 1 out left, and this one guy basically got 21 runs to win the game. That's what it was like. It was a miracle, a sporting miracle that happened, and you just don't get that in. There isn't any other sport that provides that kind of drama. So. Anyway,
I'll give you guys credit for this though, because you've talked about how football games and England and such are the rivalry and the hatred between teams is different than here, and this is going to be really dumb, but I was in London for when you guys had the Wimbledon tennis going on, and it was crazy. It was like hyped up, everyone was excited about it. It was like in Wimbledon everywhere, and I was like, wow, like they're really into this tennis thing, and you guys do go hard. So.
We do go hard for sport.
I believe it. I believe it.
When we had like Andy Murray at his best and like Tim Henman and people like that, like the whole country like stops because no one had won Wimbledon for years, and everyone was desperate for a British guy to win it. So like the whole country stopped for a tennis game, and then when the World Cup's on, the whole country's obsessed with that. The Ashes now, it's crazy. It is a great country for sport. I'll say that. I just wish we would win more things on an international level. Just give me one England football tournament and I can die a happy man. That's all I want left. Hopefully next summer. Anyway, we've bored the American audience enough with this cricket talk. Robbie, Adam, really appreciate your time as always. And thank you to everybody for the super chats and for watching and for the chat. We will be back soon, probably during training camp to do this again. Seahawksdraftblog.com. As soon as I'm away with work next week, and then when we get towards training camp and the preseason games, things are going to ramp right back up on Seahawksdraftblog.com. And if you head over to there and just cycle through on the archives, just follow down the blog, you'll find a lot of notes on the 2024 quarterback class already. So go and check that out. Been doing some videos recently. If you've missed those, check them out on the channel, and there'll be more of those to come. But for now, enjoy the rest of your summer. Hope the weather's good where you are, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.